Hello, Millennium Live listeners. It's great to be back here for another episode of Millennium Live. My name's Connor Toohey, and I am here today to discuss redefining the consolidation of cloud security. And to talk all about this today, I've got a great guest. We have Bryce Hein. He's the Chief Marketing Officer at Sysdig. I want to welcome Bryce to the podcast. Bryce, thanks for hopping on today. It's great to chat with you. Very excited.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I envy you with that blue sky behind you.
Well, I'll send this your way next week. So
Perfect.
we'll jump right in, and I want to get your thoughts on a lot of things surrounding cloud security. But I just to guess start us off. Do you mind introducing yourself? I know you got a good amount of experience, and this is your first year at Sysdig, so maybe a little bit background on you before we begin.
Yeah, happy to do that. So my name is Bryce Hein. I'm Chief Marketing Officer here at Sysdig. Sysdig is a cloud security company. I spent my career in and around data. So I've spent the last several years in cybersecurity, and I've actually made my transition from sort of detection and response over to the cloud. So I've done my cloud migration. And previous to that, a lot of big data analytics, data management, et cetera. And I'm a real believer in the power of data and how it can help us, both for good and bad, but help us in terms of defend our enterprise and move our enterprises forward.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk all about this then with you, because we are going to be talking about cloud security. And really, to start things off, usually when we mention cloud security, it's a complicated topic, and it's a very crowded space. And maybe to get your thoughts on it, where are our customers, specifically what you've seen so far as Chief Marketing Officer, but where are your customers at in this transition to the cloud?
Yeah, it's funny. There's actually two ideas inside of that question. So maybe let me address the first one, which is the complexity, right? And the thing, yes, the cloud is complex, and security pros, they get that. But we've made it harder than it needs to be as an industry, quite frankly. It's an acronym soup of subcategories. And I think one of the important things that's happening right now is this transition to consolidate all of that. And hopefully we can get into that a little bit. But yeah, so we've overcomplicated, and I think there is an opportunity to think about it in terms of domains and consolidating, this challenge. But you asked about where customers are, and I would say what we find is there's really three phases to the journey most people are on. They're making their way to the cloud, they're lifting and shifting and doing that. Phase two is they've taken advantage of some of the services and they're refactoring in the cloud. And then phase three is they're trying to really take advantage of it with respect to containers and microservices and how you scale up and you scale out and that dynamism of the cloud. And so what we find is often security programs haven't got that full, path in mind. Maybe they're chipping off prevention and they're getting ready to move into the cloud as opposed to anticipating what's coming next.
Perhaps this might have drawn you to Sysdig, but I want to know what really differentiates Sysdig from the rest of the crowd. I know you're powered by Runtime Insights, and you have your roots in runtime and making sure that these threats are stopped in real time. And so, customers seeking out solutions that can help protect and detect and respond at cloud speed. What really makes Sysdig stand out, from the noise out there?
Yeah, and you mentioned protect and detect, right? And when you think about cloud security, you're really trying to look at the software lifecycle from when it's being built all the way to when it's delivered in production. And first off, Sysdig covers that entire life cycle. So that's number one, is we consolidate cloud security, and that sets us apart. But you also mentioned runtime and real time. And I would say those are key things and values that we bring to the table. On the runtime side, what we're trying to basically bring forward is, if you know what's going on in your production environment, then you can do a better job both detecting and preventing. And so Runtime Insights cuts across that whole life cycle for customers. On the real-time side, what sets us apart is we actually created Falco, which is the open source standard for threat detection. And so you're right, it's a runtime, real-time sort of thing that we bring to the table, but it all starts with the perspective of consolidating.
You mentioned this earlier. I love the acronym soup that you were describing when we first started. But when it comes to the cloud, it's really there's a lot of challenges to it, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on them. And there's so many different aspects of moving to the cloud, which organizations need help with. So many times you'll hear cost and reliability, but
Yep.
why is it so different from past models as companies are moving to the cloud?
Well, I think there's some good news and some bad news kind of to answer this question. The good news is that the domains are very similar. So if you're a security pro and you're trying to get grasp kind of how to get your hands around cloud security, stick to the domains that are important, right? We think about posture management and handling misconfigurations. We think about vulnerabilities and how to manage vulnerabilities, identity and access, and then threat detection and response. Those four domains, and yes, there are others, but those four domains are similar, whether you're talking about traditional or cloud security. The thing that's different is the operating context, and it is complex. And this is why some of the acronym soup starts, and I would just encourage people to avoid it, kind of think about those domains first. Let me give you some examples of what is different in the cloud. First of all, there's just velocity. We recently produced a report. We do this every year. It's called the Cloud Usage Report. And it showed that the average container only lives for 5 minutes. And that's by design, right? So up and down, we're trying to utilize resources and make this a dynamic infrastructure. That's really hard if you're using technologies that scan stuff once in a while, right? So the tool sets and technologies have to be ephemeral and real time and ready. I'd say the second key thing is it's a different domain, people involved, right? So you've got dev team, infrastructure team, security. And so really trying to help the dev team shift left is important. I would say the third thing is really just the overall complexity in terms of services and people. So if I was to give you an example, we did this as part of the study. We showed that 90% of permissions that are granted in the cloud are unused. So what does that tell you? That tells you that putting our hands around configuration management, especially when you've got, infrastructure as code and all of this, is a really important thing to do. Misconfigurations can happen throughout services, permissions. And so getting your hands around a complex environment is also a challenge.
We have these challenges and they are extremely complex, but I'm sure there's a way where security leaders can really think about these challenges and address them and find solutions for them. So, let's just, for example, when somebody would hear the cost of moving to the cloud, some eyes may widen, but
Yeah.
what can security leaders do to really make sure that that cloud security is front of mind, especially when budgets are tight?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I probably painted a bleak picture, but I think it is important. And by the way, challenges are not new to the security team, right? They face them every day. It's this role that has to be both strategic to your question and also really responsive. So security pros and leaders especially need to cover a wide range. And I would say anything from cost to velocity. So if we put cost aside for a second, really what people are moving to the cloud to do is to get to market faster. It is about time. Time is the currency of the cloud. And so it is about innovating, continuous delivery, et cetera. Cost is important, especially if you look at waste. Are people over provisioning? Do people have too many tools? The average CISO has something like 40, 50 tools. Being able to consolidate that down is a key way to address cost. But if I go back to the time aspect, that is the most important thing. And so security leaders and CISOs need to think about, where's this going, right? Am I aligned with where the business is today and where it's going next? Because if they haven't containerized and so on, they will. And so they both managing costs through consolidation, but anticipating where it's going are really important things to be thinking about along the journey.
I mean, hey, we are after all talking about redefining the consolidation of cloud security. Sysdig was recognized as a representative vendor in the market guide for CNAPP that was from Gartner that was released earlier this spring. Could you give some direction to maybe about what that means and what that means for a Sysdig and how this incorporates what we're talking about here when it comes to cloud security consolidating?
Yeah, it is a really important market guide. If folks want to read it, you can get a free copy on sysdig.com. That's my little plug. That's the only plug I'll give. But the important part of this report is that they are outlining a way to consolidate. And we at Sysdig call it shift left and shield right, which is cover the entire life cycle. And they made three key points. Number one, think about integrating across. And so think about platforms that don't just provide a slice of the solution for you, but can cover the whole thing. A second key point they made was prioritizing the dev's time is just vital. And so can you take runtime information and help dev groups prioritize what they do? Let me give you an example. In the world of vulnerabilities, if you look at all containers, 85% of them have high or critical vulnerabilities. Higher critical vulnerabilities. So the dev team is just swimming in this backlog of vulns, similar to where like the security team has a bunch of alerts that they're working through. And so if you can help prioritize, figure out what's running in production to whittle that down to the select few and the few that need to be addressed because they're exploitable, then your dev team can focus on shift left the right way and also get back to innovating. And so I thought Gartner's second point about runtime insights and prioritizing dev was really important. And then Connor, the third thing that they mentioned was if you've been tracking cloud security, we talk a lot about this religious war between agents and agentless. And it really has to do to how do you instrument in the cloud. Gartner basically put that to bed and said, you need both. You need to figure out, how to implement both. And certainly we agree with that at Sysdig.
I want to get your thoughts maybe on some advice that you probably have for CISOs who are on this cloud journey and what they could do. I know you mentioned a few things, especially in terms of consolidating tools and helping the dev teams prioritize tasks. What strategic advice do you have for CISOs when they're on this cloud journey?
Yeah, I would say a few things. I'm going to actually reiterate one thing, which is align with the business and then anticipate where they're going. We see a lot of programs solving the early things, okay? Prevention, vulnerabilities, and sort of stage one of the cloud. So I would say nowhere, if an application is important and we're putting it out in the cloud, then it's going somewhere. So at some point, it's got to be efficient. It's got to be high gross margin. And so the CFO is going to be putting pressure on the business to make it scale. And that means using cloud native tools. So I would say align with the business, anticipate cloud native, which is containers and microservices and the like. Embrace the model of the operating model of DevOps because it is actually super helpful. For years, the CISO has been wanting to get dev involved and start to code in security. And the shift left environment can work done with the right data. A final point that I would say is move beyond prevention to detection and response. And a bunch of eye rolls just happened with your audience because they're like, well, didn't I do that years ago? Yes, but what we're seeing in the cloud is people are not there yet. They're worried about, cloud security posture management and not the entire scope of detecting in real time. And nowhere is that more important than in the cloud.
Bryce, I don't want I wish we could talk for an hour or so, and I'm sure we could, but in cybersecurity, You're a very busy guy, I'm sure. So I do have a final question for you, and it's something I like to do on Millennium Live, and it's sort of looking to the future. So the SEC will soon release cybersecurity risk management, strategy governance, and incident disclosure rules. And I
Yeah.
know this document now contains some new rules around cybersecurity attacks, including how organizations, how long they have to disclose an attack. And for our audience, especially those who are cybersecurity leaders of rather larger organizations, this is something that really pertains to them. So, looking towards the future of cybersecurity and the importance of it as we go forward, where is this technology going? What does the security landscape look like in the next, who knows, 5 to 10 years even?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. And I actually think those two are very, very related, the SEC and where they're going, as well as where's technology going. I think technology is inevitably going to real-time and autonomous defense and autonomous response. If you think about everything that's going on, ChatGPT and generative AI and all of that, we can't rely on rear view mirror technology. We have to be detecting and responding in real time and in an automated fashion. That is possible in the cloud just by the way we're building our infrastructure and so on. So I think real-time response, real-time detection is where the industry is absolutely going. And we got to keep challenging ourselves as an industry to get there. And how that relates to SEC, they're absolutely raising the bar. They put out a report in 2011 and some guidance, came back around in 2018. I think this one that they're working on right now is the highest bar in terms of disclosure. Basically, what they're saying is public companies need to be able to disclose a material breach within 4 days. Now, that sounds like a long time, maybe to the layperson, but that is really fast when you're on the hook, right? And you're thinking, and you're actually trying to prove out, is this material or not? Is this breach really important or not? You can imagine the crisis management that happens behind the scenes. This is a very high bar. They're saying you have to disclose via an 8K, which is yet another high bar. And so I think it really reiterates the need to be able to not only detect, but investigate very, very quickly at much different speeds than we have in using some of the historical technology out there. So really important to keep track of that. That's likely to come out in the next 3-4 months.
Yeah, so I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast will keep their eyes peeled for that. And just one last shout out, I want to make sure that everyone does have access to the Gartner's CNAPP Market Guide. We'll make sure everybody can get a hold of that. But Bryce, thank you so much for your insights, for joining Millennium Live today, for talking a little bit about Sysdig and the offerings there, and the mission to make every cloud deployment secure and reliable. Thank you for your time and for keeping the enterprise safe, as always, for our cybersecurity leaders out there. And we'll hopefully get to chat in the future, and perhaps at the Millennium Alliance cybersecurity event coming up in Chicago.
Definitely. Thanks, Connor.